In India wants the Indus Water Treaty to be modified. That's an objection being raised.
India will have to guard against being drawn into such a conflict because it has an ongoing dispute with Pakistan.
India wants the Indus
India will
Water
have to
Treaty
guard
to be
against being drawn
modified.
into such a conflict.
The sharing agreement between India and Pakistan. Now, the Indus Water Treaty is a water sharing agreement between India and Pakistan.
It will also limit the effects of damaging floods downstream.
Imagine turning on your faucet, nothing, no water for days, even weeks. As desperation rises, two nuclear-armed nations are fighting over the last major water source. This is the reality between India and Pakistan. The Indus River, lifeline for over 300 million people, is turning into a weapon. Dams, threats, rising tensions. Are we on the brink of a new war? And what happens when the water finally runs out? But how did all of this start? To understand the roots of this crisis, we have to go back in time. Back to the mid-20th century. It's 1947. British India is being torn apart. The creation of India and Pakistan is one of the most violent partitions in history. Millions displaced, families divided, and a new problem emerges. Water. The Indus River, the lifeline of both nations, doesn't follow political borders. Pakistan's farmland depends on rivers that originate in India. And with tensions rising, the question becomes, who controls the flow? For years, disputes escalated, until in 1960, the Indus Waters Treaty was signed, a deal brokered by the World Bank to divide the river system. Pakistan got control over the western rivers, Indus, Jhelum and Chenab. India got the eastern ones, Bays, Ravi and Sutlej. It was seen as a diplomatic victory, a way to keep peace. But today, that agreement is under threat. Because while the treaty worked for decades, things have changed. Populations have exploded. Climate change is melting Himalayan glaciers, disrupting water supplies. And most critically, India is building new dams, ones that could alter the flow of Pakistan's water forever. From Islamabad's perspective, this isn't just an engineering project, it's a potential act of war. Some Pakistani officials have even compared it to strangulation. And in a region where both sides have nuclear weapons, tensions over water can turn deadly fast. So how did the situation get this bad? What is India's strategy? And why does Pakistan see it as an existential threat? And most importantly, could this crisis spiral into a full-scale conflict? At the center of this conflict stand two key players, India and Pakistan. Both countries depend on the Indus River system, but their interests couldn't be more different. India, as the upper riparian state, controls the headwaters of the Indus and its tributaries. With rapid population growth and increasing demand for electricity, the Indian government has pushed for massive hydropower projects. The most controversial? The Kishanganga and Ratla dams. Two projects that Pakistan claims could severely restrict its water supply. Pakistan, on the other hand, is deeply reliant on the Indus for agriculture. Nearly 90% of its food production depends on irrigation from this river. Any disruption to its flow could trigger droughts, food shortages, and economic collapse. That's why Islamabad sees India's dam-building spree as a direct threat to its survival. But this battle isn't just about water, it's about power. For India, controlling the water supply gives it strategic leverage. If tensions rise, like after the 2019 Pulwama attack, India can use its water resources as a pressure tactic. Indian leaders have even suggested revoking parts of the Indus Waters Treaty, a move that Pakistan warns could push the region into conflict. And then there's China, the hidden player in this game. Beijing has its own interests in the region, funding massive dam projects in Pakistan as part of its Belt and Road Initiative. If India cuts off Pakistan's water, could China step in? Politically, economically, or even militarily? With all these factors at play, the question is, how far could this escalate? Some experts warn that water could become the next major flashpoint between India and Pakistan. Others argue that despite the tensions, neither side can afford a full-scale war. But with climate change reducing freshwater reserves and political rhetoric becoming more aggressive, the risk of miscalculation is growing. The best-case scenario is that both countries renegotiate the treaty to account for modern challenges: climate change, population growth, and new infrastructure. The international community, including the World Bank and the United Nations, could mediate to prevent a future water war. But given the deep mistrust between India and Pakistan, is this realistic? Instead of open conflict, both nations could continue to use water as a strategic weapon. India, as the upstream country, could leverage its control over the rivers to pressure Pakistan during political disputes. Pakistan, meanwhile, could seek closer ties with China, strengthening military and economic alliances to counterbalance India's growing influence. This scenario would keep tensions high, but avoid a direct war, at least for now. The worst-case scenario? A complete breakdown of diplomatic talks leading to direct confrontation. If Pakistan believes its survival is at risk due to water shortages, it could take extreme measures, possibly even military action against Indian dams or infrastructure. India, in turn, might respond aggressively. And in a region where both sides have nuclear weapons, even a small miscalculation could spiral into something catastrophic. But perhaps the scariest part of this crisis isn't just what's happening between India and Pakistan, it's that water conflicts like this are becoming more common around the world. From the Middle East to Africa, from the United States to China, nations are clashing over access to fresh water. The wars of the future may not be fought over land or oil, but over something far more essential: the ability to survive. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The Indus is just one example. There's the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, a massive project on the Nile that has sparked tensions between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. There's the Jordan River, a dwindling water source that fuels disputes between Israel, Jordan, and Palestine. Even in the United States, battles over the Colorado River are intensifying as states fight over shrinking water supplies. Water isn't just a regional issue. It's a global crisis, one that will define geopolitics in the 21st century. If history has taught us anything, it's that when a vital resource becomes scarce, conflicts follow. But will nations find ways to cooperate? Or are we heading towards an era of water wars? And this isn't just a problem for governments. It affects all of us. Water shortages are already impacting food production, increasing migration and straining economies. Cities like Cape Town, São Paulo, and even parts of California have come dangerously close to day zero, the moment when taps run dry. So the real question is, how will we adapt? Will nations work together to find sustainable solutions, investing in desalination, water recycling, and better conservation? Or will they turn to conflict, using water as a tool of power and control? The decisions made in the next few decades will determine not just who controls the Indus, but whether humanity itself can manage its most precious resource. Will the Indus River become a symbol of cooperation or the trigger for the next great conflict? What do you think? Could water become the main cause of wars in the 21st century? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to dive deeper into global conflicts, geopolitics, and the forces shaping our world, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is just the beginning.